It was a busy day in the Oval Office yesterday. President Trump met there with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and a small crowd of European leaders. Now, the negotiations did not bring about a hoped-for ceasefire, but the president said there was progress toward peace. All eyes now are on a potential trilateral meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin.
Joining us this morning is former ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. He served as U.S. ambassador to the country under President George W. Bush and as a diplomat in the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv during the first Trump administration. Ambassador Taylor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I want to talk about what happened yesterday, but do it in a different way. How did you feel coming out of yesterday's meeting compared to how you felt coming out of the Trump-Putin summit on Friday?
Much better, Corey. That is the sight of those Europeans united and supporting Ukraine and working closely with President Trump on moving toward a peace. That was a very good vision, very good view.
There was a lot of talk from the European leaders and clearly Volodymyr Zelensky about a ceasefire. And in fact, some pretty strong language from the Finnish president, Alexander Stubb, who said he can't imagine the next meeting will happen without a ceasefire. So let's work to try to put pressure on Russia. The president didn't really give too much on that point. What do you make of it?
So, Hillary, this is a very important point. And President Trump, up until last Friday, was very supportive of a ceasefire. He had coordinated with those same Europeans and President Zelensky last Wednesday in a phone call, so less than a week ago, saying that he was going to push very hard in the meeting with Putin on Friday in Anchorage for a ceasefire. And he said if he didn't get it, he was not going to be happy, and he would put sanctions on the Russians and on Russian customers of its oil. That seemed to change. So this discussion yesterday was a very welcome reversion back to the focus on a ceasefire. You can't have negotiations, serious negotiations going on while the Russians are bombing Ukrainian cities, killing civilians, bombing apartment buildings. That's you can't have that. And there's no trust. There's no trust of the Russians if they are continuing to bomb. But if there is a ceasefire, then they could make some progress.
Ambassador, how do you come to any agreement, whether it's a ceasefire or a peace agreement, with a country and a leader in Vladimir Putin, who many in the West simply do not trust? He's gone back on his word multiple times, and some would argue that's how we got here in the first place. How can you ultimately trust him to come to any sort of agreement and that he's going to hold to it?
You cannot, Corey. You're exactly right. You cannot trust this man. So that's why the other part of yesterday's conversation is so important about security guarantees. If you cannot trust Putin to abide by, adhere to a ceasefire, therefore you need to have a security guarantee. Ukrainians need a security guarantee that says if the Russians attack again, there will be a strong defense there. And the point there, the purpose of a security guarantee is to deter another Russian invasion. And so this discussion about a coalition of the willing that the Brits and the French are leading, but 30 nations are willing to contribute, now including the United States. That was one of the big breakthroughs yesterday, if breakthrough is the right word, a big announcement yesterday that President Trump and the United States is now prepared to support, one way or the other, this security guarantee by the coalition of the willing that the Brits and the French are putting together. That's a big deal, and that's going to be important for any ceasefire.
We've been talking a lot over the past few days about an Article 5-like resolution, which you were just talking about, that the European allies would come and defend Ukraine. If it comes to that, the question really is, how long can that continue? Apparently, according to reporting, they're going to purchase $100 billion in weapons from the U.S. to supply Ukraine. But would they have the money and manpower to actually keep this going, Ambassador?
Well, on the money side, Hillary, there is $300 billion of Russian central bank reserve money in Western banks and European banks, some in American banks. That $300 billion has been frozen in those banks ever since the Russians in February of 2022 invaded Ukraine big time. That money, 300 billion, is frozen. Just to put that in context, so far we Americans have provided $69 billion worth of military equipment to the Ukrainians, and so this is 300 billion that could be available to purchase those weapons. So that's one question. Then your second part is manpower. You're exactly right. That's a problem. It's actually a problem for both sides, both the Russians and Ukrainians. But the Russians have more Russians. The Ukrainians are a smaller population. They have tried to get around that, to address that issue by using and being brilliantly on their use of drones. And they've done that a lot. But that you still need soldiers. So that's going to be an issue that the Ukrainians, they know, of course, they got this problem, and they're going to have to deal with it.
All right, former Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much.